When you're operating at an enterprise level, nothing drives success more than effective team communication. Grammarly for Enterprise enables your company to work smarter and faster. Other AI tools can't quantify impact. With Grammarly, you get measurable results and actionable insights, like tracking key metrics that include brand compliance and readability from their effective communication score. Because when you're able to visualize your team's impact and compare performance against industry benchmarks, you can make data-driven decisions that improve critical business outcomes. So whether you need to streamline messaging between technical and marketing initiatives or cut down on emails between external collaborators, you can trust Grammarly to help employees communicate effectively across the board. Start boosting productivity company-wide with Grammarly. Visit Grammarly.com/enterprise to learn more. That's Grammarly.com/enterprise.
This time of year, a good hoodie is absolutely essential. But these days, it's tough to find one that will last through the season. That's why the American Giant Classic Full Zip Hoodie is made to last a lifetime, so you can count on it to bring you comfort and warmth year after year. Slate Magazine called it the greatest hoodie ever made, and from cotton to zipper, it's made right here in the USA. It's crafted with timeless style, heavyweight fleece, a double-lined hood, and reinforced elbow patches, which means this hoodie can withstand any outing or adventure. It'll be your new favorite hoodie, and you can depend on it for years to come. Plus, buying from American Giant means supporting local communities of farmers, manufacturers, and more. This season, snag the hoodie that will bring you comfort for life, the American Giant Classic Full Zip, and save 20% off your first order at american-giant.com when you use code CLASSIC24 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at american-giant.com, code CLASSIC24.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Our guest today is John Gold. He's author of the book, We Were Lied To About 9/11. And you can find that on his website, wewere-lied-to-about911.com. He's also done a couple of really, really excellent documentary films, 9/11, Press for Truth, and then there's a sequel to it. You can find both of these on YouTube. In their own words, the untold stories of the 9/11 families. I've been watching them all morning long, and it's very, very powerful, powerful work. John Gold, are you there?
Yes, I am, Ed. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you so much. What a heavy topic, man, and what heavy documentaries. I've really been moved today. Before we get it, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I just want to correct you on one thing. I did not have anything to do with making the movies. I just gave them the money to finish the movie because it was so important to me that they get done. So I can tell you who was responsible for it, but we can go on.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that because I didn't say your name on the Wikipedia page. But before we get into all of that and the movies and the topic and stuff like that, tell us about yourself. Who is John Gold?
John Gold is just a Joe Schmo American who saw that we were being lied to about 9/11, and for the past almost 20 years now, tried to correct the situation, tried to help the families. I've tried to help the 9/11 first responders. And I'm just a regular guy. I was a website designer, developer for about 15 years in the industry. And I'm not married, don't have any kids. I live in Philadelphia, was born and raised. And I just try to do the right thing.
Now, you wrote the book, We Were Lied To About 9/11, but you said you wrote more than one book?
Yeah, the first book is called 9/11 Truther, The Fight for Peace, Justice and Accountability. That was released in January 2012, I believe. And the We Were Lied to About 9/11, the interviews book, I did a series of 31 interviews, and I interviewed what I considered to be the best of the best concerning the issue. The first person I spoke to was Jenna Orkin, who was very much involved with the environmental impact of 9/11. The second person I spoke to was Mickey Huff, who was the director of Project Censored, and we talked about how the media in this country works. The family members. I spoke to Senator Pop Graham. I spoke to the New York Times reporter, Phil Sheenan, who covered the 9/11 Commission. I spoke to everybody I could. And that's what I did. A lot of people asked me for transcriptions of the interviews, and Mickey Huff suggested that I put it into a book. And that's what happened. It took a year and a half, cost me thousands of dollars, and I gave it away for free. And the reason I did that was because I didn't want this incredibly important information to be made available only to those that could afford it. And that's it. I'm not here to make money. I'm not here to become famous or anything like that.
So both books are for free on We Were Lied to About 911.com.
The second book tells you how to get the first book for free. Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's available on Amazon, but I give it away for free. I don't care.
Well, it's good to have it on Amazon, even if you weren't giving it away for free, because then people can find it too. When they search for it, they'll see it on Amazon there. And you can always put in the description, hey, it's free. Contact me, go to my website. Oh, boy. Okay. What were we lied to about?
Oh, a great many things. We were told there were no warnings. There were just multitudes of warnings from different countries. We were told that the source of the funding was, quote, of little practical significance for the attacks. NORAD lied, the CIA lied, and the FBI lied about so many different things. And, I want to address something about conspiracy theories, because I'm so sick of seeing that phrase. First of all, it's human nature. When those who should be able to answer our questions refuse to do so, it's human nature to question why. So to quote unquote theorize about what's happening or what happened on that day is perfectly normal. But stating theory as fact is wrong. Trying to force theories on other people is wrong. Creating litmus tests about theories is wrong. You either believe this or you're this or that. It's irresponsible, I believe. And the media, glommed onto the phrase back in when the JFK assassination happened, I believe.
Which was, by the way, the idea that was a conspiracy with more than one. Was it Oswald by himself, or were others involved? A conspiracy. But now conspiracy's taken on a whole new meaning. It doesn't even have the same meaning that it's supposed to. But I get what you're saying.
Now it means made up fairy tale. The word conspiracy literally means made up fairy tale based on how the media has portrayed it over the years. And all it means, as you said, is more than one person committing a crime. By definition, 9/11 was a conspiracy.
I know.
More than one person committing a crime. So either you agree with the quote unquote theory the government put forward about the attacks, or you don't. And I don't, because I saw how many lies they put forward.
Well, let's start with this. Do you believe our government knew in advance?
Do I think the government knew in advance?
Yeah.
There's so much information to suggest they did. Yeah, I do.
Give us some examples.
In 2007, there was an event held in Hartford, Connecticut. And one of the Jersey girls, who were the stars of the documentary you spoke of, 9/11 Press for Truth, they were the four widows responsible for making Washington, D.C. create the 9/11 Commission, something Washington, D.C. didn't want to do. So one of the Jersey girls, her name is Patty Casaza, she showed up at the event we were having, and she told us that they had met whistleblowers on the side of the road that said this government knew the date, the time, and the type of attack that was going to take place. And that's just one instance. And that's another thing. The 9/11 Commission didn't speak to whistleblowers for some reason, even though they told the families that each and every person would be heard. So she said that, and let's see, there was something called the August 6th PDB, the Presidential Daily Briefing, which is what actually got me off to the races on 9/11. The first thing that took place was in January of 2002, Bush and Cheney went to Tom Daschle's office, who was the Senate Majority Leader at the time, and asked him specifically not to investigate the attacks at all. Then, in May 15th, 2002, news of what was called the August 6th PDB was leaked. And it said that, it talked about hijackings or other types of attacks. It talked about buildings in New York City. It talked about all kinds of things. And that was focused on greatly by the 9/11 Commission. But there were 39 other PDBs having to do with Al-Qaeda that we don't even know about, that one reporter said were worse than the August 6th PDB. I think there were 14 different countries that gave us warnings. And by the way, I want to make this available. There's a site called historycommons.org that has all of the warnings in lists to show you what the warnings were. And they were mainstream media outlets. Now, at the time of 9/11, the media in this country was a different animal, I think. I mean, it was still greatly propaganda and stuff like that, but there were reporters back then who were openly asking questions about that day. They just weren't getting the attention that they deserved. And, over the years, the media's just gotten horrible. So anyway, there was a time when you could almost trust them, like where they would report on something, but it wouldn't get the coverage it deserved, like front page coverage. It would be in the back of a paper somewhere.
Do you have any specific names of who in our government knew in advance?
Of who in the government knew in advance?
Yeah.
George Tenet is a good candidate for that. I think Cofer Black was a good candidate for that. It's possible. I don't know specifically who knew what, but I do think George Tenet knew something because he lied about meeting George W. Bush in August of 2001. 2 times, I believe. Under oath, he lied about it. In his book, he said he did meet him 2 times that month, and they spoke about, he was aware of the Moussaoui arrest prior to 9/11. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You mentioned under oath, but in actuality, the 9/11 Commission, they weren't under oath. None of the witnesses were under oath, were they?
Well, in the beginning, nobody was held under oath. The families and an organization called 9/11 Citizen Watch shamed the 9/11 Commission into holding people under oath. The problem with it was that the 9/11 Commission, when the first hearing it ever had, said, we're not here to point fingers or point blame. And then at the very last one, nobody was held accountable. So even though people were held under oath and nobody was held accountable, it meant nothing. But I'm just saying, he was under oath technically.
What about the conflicts of interest of the commissioners?
Well, every commissioner had conflicts of interest, and I don't know about the final right now, but let's see. Right now I'm going to historycommons.org.
Over the past 75 years, more than 10,000 chemicals have entered our food supply, but the EU allows just 300 additives. At Thrive Market, we prioritize quality, banning over 1,000 ingredients found in conventional grocery stores. Our Healthy Swap scanner helps you find better versions of your pantry essentials without the junk, dyes, or fillers, and everything is delivered right to your doorstep. So shop at a grocery store that actually cares about your health at thrivemarket.com/get-started for 30% off your first order and a free $60 gift.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/audio.
Most weight loss plans are one size fits all, not taking into account each person's individual needs. Noom is here to change that. Noom Weight uses psychology. That's why they say losing weight starts with your brain. But it also takes into account your unique biological factors, which also affect weight loss success. The program helps you understand the science behind your eating choices and why you have cravings. Everyone's journey is different. so your daily lessons are personalized to you and your goals. One of the great things about Noom is that it's nourishing instead of restrictive. They focus on progress instead of perfection. You don't have to give up carbs, or anything for that matter. Have cravings? Food FOMO? Noom can help you lose weight while still enjoying your favorite foods. To date, Noom has helped more than 5.2 million people lose weight. Stay focused on what's important to you with Noom's psychology and biology-based approach. Sign up for your trial today at Noom.com. That's Noom.com.
Try and find it because there's some lists. Anyway, let's say, for instance, Philip Zelikow. Philip Zelikow was the executive director of the 9/11 Commission. He was in charge of basically every aspect of the 9/11 Commission. He selected what questions would be asked, who would be the witnesses, and so forth. Paul Sperry explained, quote, "Though he has no vote, Zelikow arguably has more sway than any member, including the chairman. Zelikow picks the areas of investigation, the briefing materials, the topics of hearings, the witnesses, and the lines of questioning for witnesses. In effect, he sets the agenda and runs the investigation. In 1995, Zelikow wrote a book with Condoleezza Rice called Germany Unified and Europe Transformed, a study in statecraft. While at Harvard, quote, he worked with Ernest May and Richard Neustadt on the use and misuse of history and policy making. He did a report on the assassination of JFK that was just riddled with errors. But let me get to the 9/11 Commission. Well, he also wrote the preemptive war strategy that the Bush administration used. He tried to prevent the 9/11 Commission staffers from talking to 9/11 commissioners. He tried to insert a false connection between Iraq and 9/11 into the 9/11 report, but the families and the staffers fought against it. Select staffers of the 9/11 Commission dispute the account, though Zelikow ultimately had to approve what her name was Lori Milroy's testimony before the commission. It was alleged that he had taken direction from Karl Rove, and that was according to the New York Times reporter, Philip Sheenan. And it was supposed to be a nonpartisan, commission. Before the commission even started, Philip Zelikow in early 2003 and Ernest May wrote a complete outline of the final report. Zelikow, Keenan, and Hamilton decided to keep this outline a secret from the commission staffers when, quote, it was later disclosed that Zelikow had prepared a detailed outline of the commission's final report at the very start of the investigation. Many of the staff's investigators were alarmed. Anyway, the Saudi investigations, he blocked half of the interview requests for Saudi Arabia. One of the individuals, there was something called the Joint Congressional Inquiry, which came before the 9/11 Commission, that did a study in the 9/11, and they released a report that had 28 redacted pages having to do with Saudi Arabia. And Dana Leeseman, who worked for both the Joint Congressional Inquiry and the 9/11 Commission, trying to gain access to those 28 redacted pages, and Philip Zelikow blocked her from accessing those, even though that was her responsibility. So she went through a back channel to get access to them, and then Zelikow fired her. I even believe she had something to do with writing those 28 redacted pages.
Well, what about the whole saga with Kissinger first being appointed and then back in resigning?
Yeah, I know. Very early on, Henry Kissinger was selected by the Bush administration to be the chairman of the 9/11 Commission. Once the Jersey girls, as a matter of fact, went to his offices and asked him a few questions, some poignant questions. Have you ever had any ties to the bin Laden family or something, business dealings with the bin Laden family? And he apparently was squirming around in his chair, didn't want to say anything, and the next day he resigned from the position.
Because of possible connections he had a client with bin Laden.
Well, yeah, that was one of the questions. I believe that was in 9/11 Press for Truth.
Yeah, I think it was too. Now, what about the 19 hijackers? How is it possible for these 19 hijackers to operate in the United States and not have other identified helping them here?
Well, that's the thing. They did have help in this country. If you're looking at it from the Saudi Arabia angle, the Saudi embassy helped them. It was just within the last couple of months, a name was leaked by the FBI of someone who worked at the embassy who supported two of the alleged hijackers in San Diego, Khalid Almidar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. And he has ties. He took answers or direction from Bandar, who his wife was financially connected to two of the hijackers, and Bandar himself gave money to one of the individuals associated with the hijackers in a suitcase full of money. I think it was $10,000 or something.
Wait, explain who Bandar is, because he's often called Bandar Bush. Yeah.
Right. Prince Bandar was the ambassador from Saudi Arabia to the United States from the early 80s until, mid-2000s. And now his daughter is, by the way. But he was involved in the Iran-Contra affair. I mean, he threatened, I believe he threatened Britain with terrorist attacks if they continued to investigate the BAE scandal that he was involved in, which had to do with weapons and stuff like that. During the Syria war, when that first started, he was one of the people responsible for sending terrorists into Syria to try and take out, Assad and everyone, the quote-unquote moderate rebels. If you remember that.
So here you got a guy, Bandar, named Bandar Bush, Prince Bandar, so closely associated with the Bush family. And you're telling me that it's documented that he gave money to the hijackers?
His wife gave money that found its way to the hijackers. But he gave somebody money directly. Omar Bazman, I believe was his name, who was an associate of the hijacker. So I don't remember the full story. I mean, we're talking 20 years now, but
and the thing is, too, it's not just one story. This is over and over and over and over again. We could bring up little examples.
There's so many aspects to this story. Like NORAD, I did an interview. It took me 2.5, almost 3 hours just to do that one interview about NORAD. The insider trading that was taking place prior to 9/11. That was barely investigated, and the SEC was found.
I have that in my notes about the insider trading. I was going to ask you that, but let's start first with NORAD. What are the issues with NORAD?
Oh, let's see. They gave 3 different timelines with regard to their response on the day of 9/11. Senator Mark Dayton questioned 9/11 Commission Chair Tom Keene and Vice Chair Lee Hamilton about NORAD's false statements to the people in their commission, and they also spoke to Zelikow. Mark Dayton questioned 4 individuals, and I have a tape. My YouTube channel is Gold9472. If you just do a search for Mark Dayton, he questioned about 4 individuals about their response and their lies that day. One of them was Donald Rumsfeld, Philip Zelikow, Richard Myers, who was in charge of NORAD. Let's see. On June 17th, 2004, 9/11 Commissioner Jamie Gorelick asked General Myers about NORAD's mission. Quote, in my experience, the military is very clear about its charters and who is supposed to do what. So if you go back and you look at the foundational documents for NORAD, they do not say defend us only against the threat coming in from across the ocean or across our borders. It has 2 missions, and one of them is to control the airspace above the domestic United States, and aerospace control is defined as providing surveillance and control of the airspace of Canada and the United States. To me, that air sovereignty concept means that you have a role which, if you were postured only externally, you defined out of the job. She also went on to say, I would like to know, as the second question, is it your job? And if not, whose job is it to make current assessments of the threat and decide whether you are positioned correctly to carry out a mission, which at least on paper, NORAD had. At the end of the exchange, General Myers asked, quote, did I answer both questions? And Jamie Gorelick responds, yes and no, and my time has expired. Basically, NORAD was saying that their responsibility after 9/11, they were saying after 9/11 that their responsibility was to only cover threats coming from outside the United States, as if the airspace around the continental United States is a magic place where nothing ever happens in the air.
But let me ask you this, John. Isn't that a lot of 20/20 hindsight? Like, can't we give them the benefit of the doubt that on that morning, this had never happened before, that, okay, it's a plane. Oh, really? Go ahead.
It did happen.
Go ahead.
Back in the early 70s, there were 4 planes that were hijacked. And I just added this entry to historycommons.org. But they're called the Dawson's Field hijacking. Let's see. I'll try to find something on it really quickly. It wasn't all in the same day, but it was very close. So let's see. Terrorists tried to simultaneously hijack 3 airliners heading to the United States from Europe in a series of events that culminate into 2 of the airliners, along with another plane being blown up at the airfield in Jordan. The hijackers are members of a group called the Popular Front of Liberation of Palestine, so on and so forth. Let's see. There was a quote in here that I want to read to you. Okay, the series of events will become known as Black September. Until 9/11, September 6, 1970, when the first hijackings occur, will be known as the blackest day in aviation history. The events will lead to the international aviation community to finally take coordinated action to prevent hijacking. Additionally, they are, quote, the first major terrorist hijacking attempt that captured the media's attention. And Mary Chavo, Inspector General of the Department of Transportation from 1990 to 1996, will later note the similarities between Black September hijackings and the events of September 11, 2001. When she criticizes the failure of authorities to prevent the 9/11 attacks, while the events of September 11 were astonishing in the numbers of casualties and the enormity of the devastation, she will comment, quote, the modus operandi of the terrorists was not new. Almost 31 years after 4 planes were hijacked and blown up in an Islamic Jihad stage in Jordan, 4 U.S. planes were hijacked in what Osama bin Laden would call, in a congratulatory message, the jihad.
Right, but John, well, once again, giving you the benefit of the doubt, okay, is that I'm familiar with Black September, and they did capture 4 planes. They landed them in the Middle East, and they blew them up over there on the ground. This is the first time, though, that commercial airliners were used as missiles, into buildings and stuff. So, we can kind of, and they had kind of said, okay, if there's a hijacking, everybody just sit in your seats and wait and go to the destination, and then we'll just take care of it from there. So there was like a new policy of how to deal with hijackings on. But it's not like they didn't prepare for such things. That there were protocols and all kinds of things that weren't followed on 9/11 for some reason. And I recommend you go listen to my interview with Malcolm Chaddock about NORAD, because I get all into that stuff. Yes, there were protocols. They would prepare. They would have war games and stuff like the military exercises to practice for such contingencies. So you can't really say that. Okay. Now, what about, we're talking about the hijackers had help, and they had financing, you mentioned, from Bandar Bush. Right. What about the financing that came from Pakistan? Well, Lieutenant General Mahmoud Ahmed, who was the head of the Pakistani ISI at the time of the 9/11 attacks, ordered Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh to wire transfer $100,000 to Mohammed Atta. And it's very hard to absolutely confirm that it did happen, but there's more reason to think it did happen than not. And I'm trying to find it right now, if you don't mind. All right. Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counterterrorism Division, John S. Pistoli, stated that their investigation, quote, has traced the origin of the funding of 9/11 back to financial accounts in Pakistan, where high-ranking and well-known al-Qaeda operatives played a major role in moving the money forward, eventually into the hands of the hijackers located in the U.S. In January 2002, during a visit to India, FBI Director Robert Mueller was told about Saeed Sheikh's involvement in the 9/11 attacks by Indian investigators. Apparently, quote, on the eve of the publication of its report, the 9/11 Commission was given a stunning document from Pakistan claiming that the Pakistani intelligence officers knew in advance of the 9/11 attacks. On March 3rd, 2006, the Friday Times reported that, quote, Pakistan gave tens of thousands of dollars through its lobbyists in the United States to members of the 9/11 Inquiry Commission to convince them to drop some anti-Pakistan findings in the report. This, according to FO official Sadiq. According to the Pakistan paper Daily Times, this story about bribery, quote, triggered U.S. media interest. And I said, I don't remember seeing any mention of this story at all. So if you see the media tackling it, let me know. On April 10th, 2006, Pakistan officially denied the allegations of bribery, even though many countries spend money here lobbying. Okay, here's another one. On October 1st, 2001, a little less than a month after 9/11, Lieutenant General Mahmoud Ahmed and Saeed Sheikh
may have been involved in another terrorist attack together. So again, there's a connection there between the two of them. It's more reason to think it did happen than not. Now, Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh is now, I believe, currently in prison, and there has been recent talk about them releasing him because it was found that he actually did not murder Daniel Pearl, who was the Wall Street Journal reporter that was kidnapped way back in 2001 and murdered. Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
At first, they said it was Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh that murdered him, but they found out later that it was Khaled Sheikh Mohammed that murdered him. But I think it was Ahmed Sheikh or Omar Sheikh that helped to hijack or kidnap him.
Well, wasn't there something too about an ISI official visiting Washington D.C. The day before?
That's Lieutenant General Mahmoud Ahmed, the guy who ordered Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh to wire transfer $100,000 to Mohammed Atta. First off, he met with people, I believe George Tenet and others in the months before 9/11 in Pakistan. He met with Porter Goss, Bob Graham, and someone else, I believe, in the weeks before 9/11. And then during the week of 9/11, on the day of 9/11, he was in D.C. talking to people. So somebody who was supposedly involved with 9/11 was in D.C. talking with people, and he was allowed out of the country. So who knows?
Many people were allowed out of the country, weren't there? Not just people always talk about the Saudi Arabians who were allowed to hop on their planes.
Correct.
But there were other actual suspects that were allowed to leave.
Other suspects that were allowed. Well, okay, there was somebody. Okay, there was an incident after 9/11 where Saudi flights were allowed to leave the country.
Right.
People, related to the Bin Ladens and others, and one of them, and they said at the time that no terrorists, quote unquote terrorists, were allowed to leave the country. But one of them was somebody by the name of Khalil Bin Laden, who was the brother of Osama Bin Laden. It was wanted in Brazil for terrorist activities, I believe, and he was one of the people allowed to leave. That didn't have to do with 9/11, but I don't know which suspects you're referring to.
Well, in the documentary, it said something about 800 people were suspects and were allowed to leave, and none of them were charged.
Yeah, after 9/11, they went through all these arrests of people, Muslim this, Muslim that, everybody. It was just horrible. People who had nothing to do with terrorism were being arrested. And, a lot of them were eventually allowed to leave, I believe, or were freed, I believe. So,
okay, let's take a little commercial break. We're here today with John Gold. You can find his website. It's called We Were Lied To About 911.com, and there's a book by the same name, We Were Lied To About 911, The Interviews. He's the financier behind two documentary films. One is 9/11 Press for Truth.
One of the financiers.
Okay, one of the financiers. In their own words, the untold stories of 9/11. We'll be right back with more of John Gold after these messages. And by the way, too, his YouTube page is Gold9472. You can go there and search his YouTube channel there and catch all his other material he's put up. John, in the documentary, there was an episode in there about one of the hijackers was living with an FBI informant.
Yeah, that was Abdusattar Sheikh. There's a lot of confusion about his story. He was interviewed, the Bush administration blocked him from testifying before the Joint Congressional Inquiry. I do believe he spoke with the 9/11 Commission. There's something called memoranda for the record. These are documents that are essentially handwritten notes about what happened during different interviews. And his was classified, I believe, for a long time, and then I think it was released or leaked. I don't remember. I wish I remembered everything about him. But yeah, he was supposedly an FBI informant and had the two hijackers, or I think, were living in the same building as him, or same apartment complex, or same house, I might forget. And that was it. And Stephen Butler, I think it was his handler at the time, said that if they had brought him in, maybe they might have been able to figure out the attacks or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think he said, no, that's okay. He said something like it would have been a full court press if we would have known. No, let me tell you something. The documentary is really heavy, weighing on my mind today after watching this. I really can't recommend this enough. People should go and check out the 9/11
Thank you
press.
very much.
No, really, very powerful. 9/11 Press for Truth. It's hard to watch, because a lot of raw emotions too. And unlike a lot of the stuff, the little tiny documentaries, there are millions of on YouTube with all the music, sometimes even comical music and all kinds of, this has a real personal impact on your emotions, filled with facts too as well. Now, we were talking about the insider trading. We talked a little bit about the financing coming from Pakistan. We can document that. And it's interesting, too, how bin Laden wound up retired in Pakistan and a compound over there as well, right?
Well, also the U.S. allowed him to escape into Pakistan.
Right, I forgot.
Bin Laden was protected by agencies for years prior to 9/11. I have all that documented. By the way, I've been reading from an article that I wrote years ago called "The Facts Speak for Themselves." It's available on 911truthnews.com. It's also available on my first book. I wrote all of this, and it's all sourced and so forth. But so you want to talk about insider trading?
No. But real quick, bin Laden was allowed to leave. Yeah.
Protected, right? Hold on. Protected. I'm sorry, it's just, I don't know it all from memory. There are several indications that Osama bin Laden has been protected and even allowed to escape after the 9/11 attack. On December 24th, 1998, at the request of then CIA Director George Tenet, President Clinton signs an order authorizing the CIA to assassinate Osama bin Laden. Philip Sheenan will write that Clinton's authorization is, quote, written in stark language, end quote, and it makes it very clear, quote, that the president was telling the tribal leaders they could kill bin Laden, end quote. However, this order is, quote, closely held within the CIA, and the 9/11 Commission will comment, quote, this intent to have bin Laden killed was never well communicated or understood within the agency, end quote. Quote, apparently it is never even communicated to Michael Scheuer, who was head of Alex Station, the bin Laden unit in Yemen, the CIA's bin Laden unit. Scheuer will later express his frustration at not being allowed to try and kill bin Laden. Quote, we always talked about how much easier it would have been to kill him. Now, he's not exactly a trusted source anymore, Michael Scheuer, but that's a different story. In February 1999, Clinton rewrites the order for the CIA and, quote, deletes the wording authorizing an operation to simply kill bin Laden, end quote. In December 1999, Clinton issues a wider memo that deals with a wider set of contingencies, and they authorize the use of force only within the context of a capture operation, not an assassination attempt. The CIA is therefore allowed to try to kill bin Laden only using one specific group of assets, tribal leaders tracking him in Afghanistan, still based on the earlier instructions. But the CIA does not, quote, test the limits of available legal authority, apparently because the CIA's bin Laden unit is told of the kill authorization or is not told of the kill authorization and due to confusion. So they weren't, the bin Laden unit, the unit that specifically focused on bin Laden, was never told about the kill authorization. On May 23rd, 2011, the Telegraph released a report on Michael Scheuer, the former head of Alex Station. It said, quote, during his 22 years in the CIA, 3.5 as head of an 18-man Osama bin Laden unit, he told his bosses at Langley on 10 occasions they had a clear opportunity to kill or capture the terrorist. On all 10, he was told to hold his fire. On September 21st, 2001, it is reported that President Putin, quote, had warned the Clinton administration about the dangers posed by bin Laden. Washington's reaction at the time really amazed me. They shrugged their shoulders and said matter-of-factly, we can't do anything because the Taliban does not want to turn him over. That's what Putin said. After 9/11, Bush says, if he thinks he can hide and run from the United States and our allies, he will be sorely mistaken.
Wasn't it Bill Casey, CIA director's daughter, who was the lobbyist for the Taliban?
I don't know.
Yeah,
the person knows about. Go ahead.
It was one of the CIA daughters. I always get Colby and Casey confused. I can never quite remember. I had Colby's son on the show. I should have asked him. So I'm pretty sure that it was Casey's daughter who was the lobbyist for the Taliban around that period of time. Yeah.
No. Well, Gary Bernstein is the one who said that he was allowed to escape into Pakistan through Tora Bora. On December 5th, 2001, James Mattis, quote, is convinced his forces conceal the Tora Bora area to trap bin Laden. Around this date, Mattis argues strongly to his military superiors at CENTCOM that his troops should fight at Tora Bora, but he is turned down. So anyway, it seemed like he was protected for a lot of years. I believe the U.S. was well aware of his existence in Pakistan because the U.S. CIA and Pakistani ISI worked hand in hand together for a long time. So if one knew something, which the ISI apparently did know of his whereabouts, then I would think the CIA would be aware as well.
And what do you think the motive would be for the ISI then to fund the terrorists?
The ISI to fund the terrorists?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, if they're partners in crime with the CIA, which they were, along with Saudi Arabia, along with the Mossad, in that area, who knows?
Yeah. Oh, boy. Okay, that's the finance.
I know.
Let
me make one point. I don't know the truth about 9/11. I wish I did. I really wish I did. But that's a problem in and of itself. There was a time when I used to think I did know the truth about 9/11, and I didn't. Once I realized that, and once I accepted that, I became a better advocate for 9/11 justice. Because, as I said, not knowing is just as bad, or is a problem in and of itself.
Do you mind if I ask what your previous theory? What was your previous theory?
I never really had a theory.
Okay.
I just thought, my first theory was they just let it happen. And I think that was most people's assessment. But over time, as you start to read things, you start to see all these coincidences and these outright lies from people and things that were omitted. Like, for instance, there was something called the 9/11 Family Steering Committee, which was made up of 12 family members, and they monitored the 9/11 Commission. They submitted them with hundreds of well-researched questions for them to answer and so forth. They only touched on about 30% of the questions they put forward. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What about the insider trading?
Oh, okay. Well, by the way, did you see the insider trading that took place after the COVID-19 was introduced?
No, I did not notice that. That got right past me.
Apparently, there were some people in Congress who were made aware of it, and they made some financial decisions and made some money off of it. But then they were allowed off the hook, just like the people from 9/11. So on or around August 6, 2001, what appear to be, quote, suspicious put option purchases are made. According to one analyst, quote, from what I'm hearing, it's more than coincidence. In early September 1, short selling of reinsurance company stocks take place. In September 2001, suspicion of insider trading takes place in many other countries, resulting in the creation of several investigations. The countries mentioned are Belgium, France, Switzerland, Luxembourg, Monte Carlo, Cyprus, the UK, Italy, and Japan. On October 3rd, 2001, the San Francisco Chronicle will report that the NYSE, New York Stock Exchange, sees, quote, unusually heavy trading in airline and related stocks several days before the attacks, unquote. Some of those companies are American, Continental, Delta, Northwest, Southwest, United, and U.S. Airways. In early September 2001, there was a sharp increase in short selling of American and United Airlines stocks. Between September 6th and September 10th, 2001, suspicious trading of put options on American and United occur. Ernst Weltecke, the president of a German central bank, says that his bank has done a study. Quote, there are ever clearer signs that there were activities on international financial markets that must have been carried out with necessary expert knowledge, end quote. His researchers have found, quote, almost irrefutable proof of insider trading, end quote. Now, the 9/11 Commission said there was nothing to any of this. And are you familiar with Matt Taibbi, Rolling Stones?
Yes, I am, yeah.
At one time, he had debated David Ray Griffin, who was an author for 9/11 stuff. And I also debated him because I didn't like the debate that took place with David. When I asked Matt Taibbi, the originator, he wrote a story about how corrupt the SEC is, who let all the insider trading off the hook. I asked him if we should trust the SEC's conclusions concerning the suspicious trading of 9/11. He said, quote, the whole notion that U.S. interests would have insider traded 9/11 is the dumbest thing you people have ever thought of. And that's saying quite a lot. I've even stopped for a second to think about this rationality. Any person that would be in a position to know about the 9/11 attacks from within the U.S. government would also have access to mountains of other vital economic information, like changes in interest rates, information about military contract awards, or the results of USDA or CBO or Bureau of Labor reports, It is exponentially easier to trade on interest rate shifts or unemployment statistics than it is to short the freaking airline you're going to use in a terrorist attack. And doing so has the additional benefit of leaving physical evidence tying you to the crime. If, in fact, anyone did insider trade 9/11, that to me would be proof that it had to be Arab terrorists or somebody similarly unsophisticated, because nobody with wherewithal to pull off a, quote, inside job on the scale you folks believe would bother trying to steal a few nickels in such a crude, silly way. That's like accusing a man who's just robbed 3 Rembrandts from the Met of ripping the head off a parking meter with a wrench on the way home. Basically, I responded by saying, we thought it up. Obviously, you didn't pay attention to the news regarding the allegations of insider trading, nor did you pay attention to the fact that when the families asked the FBI about it, they were essentially ignored. I got it. We should we should trust the SEC. So that was just nonsense on his part, because obviously it does take place. There was a report that came out after COVID that talked about how they do have access to information about the market.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're insider trading all the time. I think it's legal for Congress to do it.
Well, so Matt Taibbi's just an ass as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Especially with regard to 9/11, I don't know about his other works, but with regard to 9/11, I don't mean to say that word. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Now, we only got about 4 minutes left. Do you think we have time to cover Able Danger and that whole story?
Basically, there was a military group called Able Danger that identified 4 of the supposed hijackers a year prior to 9/11. Kurt Weldon, who was my representative at the time, who was involved in all of that, he said it was a cover-up from both the Clinton and the Bush administrations. Mm. And, you know, it's just another one of the many, many, many stories about 9/11.
Now, I'm curious. In the documentary, they showed Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer. Was he's been on my show. We didn't talk about Able Danger, but was he one of the military people involved in Able Danger, or he was just talking?
Yes, he was.
Really? Okay. Okay, that's interesting.
I met Tony a couple of times. We haven't spoken in a long time.
Well, we've only got a couple of minutes left. What would you like to leave us with?
Okay, the people of the world, the families, both deserve and require absolute truth, justice, and accountability for what happened that day. Anything less is simply unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. You know, they've had to watch 20 years, the names of their loved ones used to do so many horrific things around the world and in this country. I can't imagine what it's. I know I'm familiar with the anger that I have about being lied to about that day. I can't possibly imagine what it's like to know everything that I do on top of having lost someone that day. It's inconceivable to me to put myself in their shoes. So try to do that. Try to put yourself in their shoes, and you can't. They just deserve better, and we all do, because we were all attacked that day.
Yeah, every year, we do this memorial, this remembrance, but none of this stuff is talked about. I really appreciate you, John Gold. You can check out his website, We Were Lied to About 9/11, 911.com. Then he wrote a book called We Were Lied to About 9/11, The Interviews. John, there's one on Amazon, too. Which one is that again?
9/11 Truther, The Fight for Peace, Justice, and Accountability.
The YouTube channel is Gold9472. You was mentioned before this article you wrote, The Facts Speak for Themselves. Where can we find that?
You can find that on 911truthnews.com.
And you can find the documentary films on YouTube. 9/11 Press for Truth is one. And the other one is In Their Own Words, The Untold Story of the 9/11 Families. John Gold, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. It's a tough subject, man, to go into, but very brutal information here. And it's put together very, very well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed, for having me on today.
Good night.